Hi, welcome to my video on how to put new veneer on your dashboard. This was something I thought about doing for a while. I was actually going to get professionals to do it until I saw some quotes. People were quoting about 700 or 800 euro to do the job, and I just thought maybe I'd be able to do it myself. I did a little bit of research, and the video is basically a report on the steps that I did and the way I went about it, and I think it turned out pretty well. So if I can do it, so can you. This is just some stuff that I used to do the work. Nothing complicated, everything pretty simple and straightforward, and I had most of it already. So some scissors and a sharp craft knife for cutting the veneer, some files of different sizes and shapes for finishing it all off when it's done, a scraper for spreading the glue, some bulldog clips just to hold things still when you don't have enough hands. Came in very handy. A pencil for drawing out around the pieces and making templates and stuff. Some pieces of cardboard that I used for making templates. This is a food vacuum packer, which I bought from Amazon. I'll put a link in the comments. It was just, I think, 45 euro, something like that. And that's what's used to squeeze the veneer into place. Using a vacuum, and it works very well. Very impressed with how it worked out. I had a straight edge which I used for some marking out and as a guide for cutting with the knife. And then in terms of consumables, I bought this wood glue. I've no idea if it's good or not. It certainly sticks the stuff down initially. It said it was waterproof, was the main reason that I bought it. Just in the local hardware store, nothing fancy. I've no idea if it'll still be good in 20 years time, but it seems to work okay. I bought some filler for preparing the dashboard where there were little gouges and cracks and things in it. Again, nothing fancy, just from the local hardware store. I thought mahogany was close enough to the color I'm using, but it turns out none of the filler will be seen anyway. And then I bought some stain, or wood dye these are called. I don't know if they're the same thing as stain or not. For coloring the wood afterwards to try to match in with the original stuff, because I'm not doing the things like the window trim. They're all in good enough condition, so the dashboard will have to be matched in with those. And the first thing that I did was to sand off all of the lacquer on all these pieces. This is the main dashboard piece, the biggest piece that I have to do apart from the windscreen bowl, and I just sanded off all of the varnish and lacquer or whatever it was that was on here to get back to wood, so that the glue has something that it can bind to. The next step then was to fill in. Here there was some damage where the old veneer had chipped off, so I just filled those with the filler that I showed you at the start of the video to make it a flat surface for the new veneer to stick to. This is the veneer that I got. It seems to come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. Because of COVID, I had to kind of buy this remotely over the phone with just a few pictures being sent across the internet, rather than visit a warehouse, which would be a better way to do it. Visit a vendor and go and actually check the sheets yourself to make sure you get a good match. This is walnut, which is the same as my original veneer. I think that this is a little bit, if we looked, this area is the closest match, but I don't have anything like enough of that material to just use this area. So I have had to go in, I've kept the pieces up as far as I can to this side, and I've had to go into this more striped part, but I think it'll work out okay. You can see this. I think this is heartwood from the tree, and it's much lighter, and doesn't suit me at all. So that all goes to waste. But the pieces are nice and wide, so I'd recommend get as wide a leaf as you can, because it means you can get you don't have to make a join in your veneer when you're covering the dashboard pieces. So if you can get a piece that the dashboard fits onto, it makes life an awful lot easier. Now, if you have a flat piece of dashboard that you're doing, it's very easy. I would just sit the piece down on top of the veneer, draw roughly around it, cut it out, and stick the veneer down. It's very straightforward. But for these curved pieces, it's a bit more complicated. So this dashboard piece at the end, it curves up this way, but it also curves this way. So you've got a compound curve here, and obviously the wood can't stretch, so it has to be split. That's why these little triangular areas are cut out here. It has to be split so that it can spread across the greater length of this curved area. So from trial and error, I figured it's better with these pieces to make a cardboard template first, because you can make a mess of that as many times as you like and redo it without going through your veneer. So what I did with this was I literally just sat the piece down on top, and I formed the cardboard to fit the veneer. You know, I squashed the cardboard in. There's a step here, which you can see. If we go this way, there's a step here in the dash, and just push it into the crease, you know, and bend it around. And I used a few of the bulldog clips that I showed you earlier on, just to hold this in place, and I made these little slits to make everything fit and form to that curve. And then when that was all sitting here nice and in the right position, I traced around it with a pencil and just cut it out, so that then I can transfer this shape when it's flat onto the piece of veneer and have as little excess as possible sticking out in these areas, because the more excess that's there, the more difficult it is to bend the veneer. And yeah, I just found it works much easier if you can get the veneer to more or less the correct size, with having as little overlap sticking out these areas as you can. Okay, so I'm going to try and show you the process. I have here my main dashboard piece and the veneer that I've cut out to be roughly the same size. It's there'll be a bit of overlap all the way around, so there's a small margin for error, but being especially careful of this curved end, that if the shape more or less correct, so I don't have too much material overhanging here, like I said earlier on, which makes it difficult to bend. You can see where the factory slit the veneer here and here when they applied it. They didn't actually cut any out, they just slid it here, and it spread as they bent it around the curve to make that gap. And likewise here, it spread so that, you know, basically a piece this wide is now covering an area this wide. So I've done the same with mine, but I've actually slit mine in 3 places to make it easier, because when I was trying to get the shape right, I actually cracked the veneer as I tried to bend it around this corner here. So you can see I have made, I don't know if you can see that, I've made slits there, but this one actually split. So I slid it back to here, and then it split the rest of the way. But hopefully that won't be too bad once it is glued to the backing. So this is the side that I'm going to have showing, so I need to glue the back side. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is to apply this to the dash. Let's see what happens. Now the first thing that I usually do is just put a couple of bulldog clips on it in some easy places to make sure that it doesn't move in any big way, and leaving a little bit of overlap at the ends to make sure, just get things kind of more or less lined up, and clip it in place. It's quite easy to slip it around once you haven't made too much of an effort of squeezing the veneer down onto the down onto the dashboard piece. So that's it. I basically just clipped all along this top row, and now comes the interesting part, trying to form it. And I tend to try to sort of stick it where I can, get it to actually adhere a bit so that it doesn't slip around as much, because it's much easier to put it into the vacuum bag once that's been done. Okay, so hopefully you can see the vacuum packer here. So because the bag is effectively just a tube right the way through, so you have to seal one end. There's a little heating element here. So you just place the bag in like this. This is a little vacuum chamber, and it sucks the vacuum out through this. I don't know if you can see, there's a little, through this little spud that sticks up here, is a little pipe. So it's a very straightforward process. You just push the lid down firmly and press the button that says seal. It heats that element, which melts the two bits of plastic together. And when it's done, the light goes out. Open it up, and it's just created a line along. I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but it creates a line along here to seal the sides of plastic together. So I'm trying to think which end I'm going to put in first. I'm going to put in the simple end into the bag first, so that I can get my hand in to manipulate the complicated end if I need to. Did anybody notice the boo-boo? I sealed it up without sucking any air out. So I just cut the end off and go again. What I wanted to do was, it seems that there's a difference between some of these food sucking packing units. This one has, I'm trying to get the buttons into the frame here. This one actually has a button to stop the process. So you can stop it mid-vacuum and kind of control how much air it's taken out of the bag. So I just press the vacuum seal button there, and it'll start sucking air out. And when I get to the point where I'm ready, I can just press that stop button and halt the process. It's a long length of bag, so it takes quite a while to get the air out of it. You can feel it starting to tighten up a little bit now. Go a little more. And what this machine does, if you don't press stop and it gets to a point where it's sucked all the air out, it'll seal automatically at the end, so you have to be careful not to let it go too far. I can feel it tighten up more now. Starting to pull the stuff in. So I'm just going to stop it there. Check all the position of everything is okay. That I haven't any dashboard exposed. It shouldn't be when it tightens up. Sorry that most of this is off camera now. I've got this complicated end too now in a second. Suck a little bit more. Stop it. So it's fine all the way down the back end. You can see it's starting to pull the veneer into that step that we were talking about earlier on. I tried to slide it up. But it doesn't want to move. Okay, so I basically worked my way all the way along to try and push the veneer up into that crack there, into the, not the crack, but into the step. So I'm ready now to suck some more air out of here. The whole thing has slid, the veneer has slid this way upwards on the backing. So just keep an eye on that as I tighten things up. Towards the end you can imagine that it goes pretty quick once it gets close to the end. This end, the complicated end here, it looks nice from the back anyway. See if we can see from the front. Yeah, it's reasonable. Okay. I can just feel there's a little bit of veneer has not been pulled up towards this guy here. So I'm just going to try to keep some pressure on that while I suck some more air out. Make sure it goes down. You can hear the tone changes on the machine when it gets close to the end. So just pause it again there now. All the way down again. Check everything. It's pulled it in here, I can feel that. It's good. I don't know if you can see, my splits have opened up here as they were supposed to. So I have a little gap here. So I might put a clip on afterwards if I need to. Okay, I'm going to go for vacuum and seal. So I should suck the remaining air out now, and then it's on the seal now at the moment. There we go, it's sealing, the lights come on. So it'll seal that in. And then once I take it out of the machine, it's easier to just go over and see what's the situation. So it looks good along that stepped edge. Don't know if it'll show up on the camera. You can see the V's have split there. This crack that I had here isn't too bad. It's not great, but it's not too bad. There's a little ripple there, which it seems I can just press out of it. A big ripple there. Now there's a mistake that I made. There's a big ripple just here, and that should be a smooth corner. And I've left so much material sticking out here that it makes it hard for that to bend. But I'll put a couple of clips on it, and I should pull it into shape. What I've done here is I've just gone across the surface, and I found that little ripple that was there just beside this vent opening here, and I've used some, this is just that underlay, very cheap laminate flooring underlay. So I just used a couple of wadges of that to spread the load a bit where I was clamping and try to keep it flat. And there was the same thing down here. Just little places where it looked like it needed a little bit more than what it was getting from the vacuum bag. So that's it. Simple as that. I leave it overnight, 24 hours pretty much. And yeah, I'll open it up tomorrow. It's 24 hours now after we left this, so I'm just going to take the clamps off and take a look. Looks like the seal was good. The bag hasn't opened any, hasn't relaxed any from the way we left it, so doesn't look like there's any air getting in. And my vice grip didn't puncture it, which is good. So let's see, the clamping seems to work pretty well. I have a little lump just here. I don't know if it'll show up or not. Try to catch it in the light. A small little lump just there, which that'll probably be okay. I'd say we'll be able to sand that or something. See a little, there's a small dark patch here, which you can sort of see it there at the end of my finger, which I guess is some glue coming through, or some glue that was on the front of it or something. But looking at the rest of it, it looks okay. There are some places where glue has leaked through. You can see little small white, don't know if you see the little white patches there, little bits of glue that seem to get sucked up through through the veneer, but once they dry, they sand off pretty easily. This edge that I was trying to push down here with my vice grip and stuff has worked pretty well. There's a little crease here. I don't know how I can make that any easier to see. Maybe you can see it. It's behind my fingernail there. And this was my crack. You can see I have a nice even split up as far as the crack, and then this is the crack that occurred before I glued it on. So that's not the end of the world. That'll be okay to deal with later in the process. So yeah, all in all, pretty pleased. It's 48 hours now since we did put the glue on the veneer, so it's another 24 hours since the last part. And I don't know if you can see, but there were areas like this where there was a little white rim of soft glue and all around the edges, which has now gone clear as it hardened. Something I didn't record, but that I did do, was inside these little triangular splits here, while the glue was still a little bit soft, I got my craft knife and I just used the blade to pick out the little corners in where the veneer meets the backing, just to clean out those little corners in there from the soft glue. So that what we're going to do is stick little slips of veneer into these so that they would have a flat bed to lie on. Basically, you can do it afterwards, but it's more painful and hard work to pick off the hard crusty glue, as the soft stuff just pulled out nice and easy. Next stage is to trim this up. You can see there's a lot of overlap all around the piece, and to cut out all these holes and things. And I generally do the rough work. I found that this little craft knife is perfect for doing that. The only thing to be careful about is the direction that you cut in. So for instance, if you see this part here, the grain of the veneer runs in behind the backing. So if you were to cut this way, the veneer has a tendency to split like this, and the split then would carry on past the backing and maybe damage the good veneer that you want to keep. So in an area like this, I would always cut in that direction so that the knife is closing on the grain, if you like, rather than trying to pull the grain open. So that's just something to be aware of as you're trimming around. And but otherwise, it's simply a case of just running the knife right the way around. So if I start on this corner here, you know, it sort of peels off quite easily. So I just kind of hack at it until I get down to just a couple of mil of an edge, overlapping still, and then I go at that more delicately. Now the edge is trimmed back, and you can see here where I've left a bit of an overlap. So what happens then is I just take a file, a flat file, pretty fine, and I just run it along until that lip is gone and you're filing flush with the backing, with the plywood at the back. So you can feel when the file reaches the backing piece. Stops moving. And you can actually even see when it starts to rub the backing. So then that little straight edge along there now is nice and clean and straight. This is on the finished side that you'll see. And then what I do for the curved bits, I just have a file which is, I don't know if you can see that, one side is round and the other side is flat. So I use the curved side to do those corners just the same way, just rubbing. There's a little bit too much material here on this, actually. You can hear it flapping around with the file, so I'll just bring that back a bit closer so that the veneer doesn't vibrate as much as you're filing. Just the same thing. So that's it, it's not complicated. You can see it just makes a nice clean curve. A lot of these edges will be covered by trim anyway, but it's not difficult to just go around and repeat that all the way around. And then the same for these openings. I'll start with maybe I might even drill a hole in the middle and then work my way around with the knife and then follow that with the file to finish off. And like I said, I have lots of different shapes, you know, the little chainsaw file there for doing these. It's the good size for these slots and stuff, and slightly larger round file for doing the cutouts for the switches and things. So it's handy to have a few different shapes and sizes of files, but it's just the same process all the way across. So looking at filling in these two slips at the end here, these little triangles that we have to fill in. What I do is I just cut a little piece of the veneer and just make a rough cut of the angle, try it and see if it works, if it fits the hole, and then I was adjusting it using a piece of sandpaper, just on the edge, forwards and backwards, using the sandpaper on the edge of the veneer until it fits just right. And I've left this long tab on the end just because it's much easier to handle than trying to handle a little small sliver. And then what I do is, because it's tapered like this, start out here. I'm not going to do it because you won't see, but I put my thumb over the top to keep the veneer pressed against the backing, and then slide it in, and it kind of wedges itself into that hole there. And you can see once it's pushed in and glued and sanded back, you won't see that there's a crack there at all. So that's basically the technique that I use. I just put glue on the back of the slip of veneer. Like I said, put a thumb over the top of that crack and shove the veneer in underneath my thumb, keeping pressure downwards with the thumb and pressure inwards, pushing this in, and then let that dry and, you know, snip the end off, trim it up, and then you can sand it flat, and it works out pretty well. You can see this is the other end, which I did previously. I made a mess in that I didn't match the grain well here, but you can see the triangle that I put in, and there's another one which is much better in terms of the grain. The little one is down here, so you can tell, you know, there's a bit of trim that goes over this edge here, so you won't see the outside edge anyway, but once it's all stained and lacquered and everything, it becomes pretty much invisible, so it works well. This is it pushed into place now. I've put glue on the back and just pushed it in there. You can see it's sticking out, and it's pretty good in terms of sitting flush. It doesn't stick out proud of the rest of the timber, I think, although you could always correct that with sanding anyway once it's, you know, once there's some of it in the hole. So then it's just a case of repeating the technique on this top one. This is the second filler piece. You can see it's kind of uniform down as far as where my slit that I made ends, and the crack that happened accidentally begins, but it fits good enough. So I'm just going to glue up the back of it and poke it in here, and you'll see the finished product. That's it, it's home now. It worked out pretty good. There's still a small little gap here, just the end of the crack, but it's so fine I don't think it'll be visible when the final thing is all covered and coated and stuff. So let these dry now, this one and this one, and I will probably give them a bit of a clamp here and here overnight, and then they'll just get trimmed off, and the next step is to sand everything. And during the sanding we'll fix things like this. You see there's a little crease just here, so hopefully that'll sand away. And then there was our little kink which we had, little lump, which is just here. Can't even see it now, I can only feel it with my finger. So I think that the lump, maybe if I go like that, see that little tiny lump there? I think that the lump is not as tall as the veneer is thick, so even just sanding that flat will be fine. Anyway, again, there's trim that goes all the way along the bottom edge there. So yeah, it's not a big deal. So the glue is set now. I'm just going to trim off the ends of these guys, and then all that's left to do is to do some sanding. So I'll just trim off the ends with the knife, give them a rub with the file, and then we're on to finishing. I've just spent the last maybe 10 minutes sanding it, literally just by hand with a bit of, I think it's 120 grit. Yeah, it's 120 grit sandpaper. Just literally rubbing with the grain, paying attention to the places that I filled in with those little slips, just to make sure that they're smooth and flush. And looking for all the little, if you remember the little white glue spots that we saw after I sucked it in the vacuum bag. So you can see those kind of show up as little shiny spots. So making sure that all of those are removed. But you can see now it's quite a forgiving process. Like the bits that I filled in here, you can hardly tell that a filler piece has gone in there. There's the smaller one, it's just here. Yeah, pretty happy with that. It's ready now for colouring and coating, really. Nothing left to do in terms of the woodwork.